It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from a 36-hour shift at the hospital. My feet so swollen they barely fit in my shoes. The apartment was sterile. Silent. He was waiting for me. My father. Dr. Michael Harrison. Sitting in the dark in his armchair. His face like stone. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my tablet. My art. He held it up. "I saw your laptop," he said. His voice was dangerously quiet. The one he used in the R before a bad outcome. "You're throwing away a decade of work. A medical degree. For this," he waved the tablet, displaying a complex digital sculpture I'd spent a month on. "This? Digital. Garbage. You are an embarrassment." He stood up. And for the first time, he looked at me. "Get out. Have you ever been told your passion is a waste of time, or a frivolous hobby? Let me know your story down in the comments." I read them all. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just turned. Walked to my room. Packed a single duffel bag. And left the life I was supposed to have. As I walked out of that old money Lincoln Park brownstone, I realized it had never been a home. It was a residency. A museum to the Harrison medical legacy. My father, Dr. Michael Harrison, was the chief of surgery. My mother, Jennifer, was the chair of the hospital guild. My older brother, Christopher, was the golden child. A surgical resident who breathed the sterile air of the OR like it was oxygen. And then there was me, the black sheep, the one who saw systems and beauty, not just blood and charts. Growing up, our family dinners weren't dinners. They were grand rounds. We'd sit at the massive, dark mahogany table, and my father would grill us. "Christopher," he'd say, "describe the differential diagnosis for a patient presenting with acute epigastric pain." Christopher would lean forward, his eyes bright. "Well, first you'd rule out myocardial infarction, but it's more likely acute pancreatitis, cholecystitis, or a perforated ulcer." He thrived. He was my father's mirror. Then, my father's eyes would turn to me. "Sarah, your anatomy, midterm. 94. Yes. Sire? 94 is not 100. 94 is what the second best student gets. The Harrisons are not second best." My mother would just smile tightly and rearrange the silverware. Her entire life was a performance for an invisible audience. Her favorite phrase, the one that haunted my childhood, was a hissed whisper. "Sarah, what will people think?" I was the family's greatest liability. The one who, at 15, had taken a welding class and built a small, abstract sculpture of a bird. I'd brought it home. So proud. My father looked at it, his lip curling. "A waste of good metal," he said, and went back to reading his medical journal. I buried the sculpture in the back of my closet. The day I got my white coat at the med school ceremony was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. My father took the photo, his hand heavy on my shoulder. I smiled. But all I could feel was the starched cotton collar. It wasn't a coat. It was a straitjacket. I didn't have the words for it then. But our family wasn't a family. It was a legacy. We weren't children. We were assets. Expected to perform and generate returns in the form of prestige. This is the hallmark of a transactional family dynamic. Love is conditional. It's not given freely. It's a performance bonus for upholding the family brand. For years, I'd been trying to earn a love that was never available. Only least. My father's rage that night. I finally understood it. He wasn't angry that I was failing myself. He was furious that I was failing him. I wasn't just his daughter, I was his investment. And I was defaulting. So I was out. 25 years old. Disowned. With $10,000 in savings and a duffel bag of clothes that smelled like antiseptic. The first thing I did was walk to a dumpster behind a diner and throw away my gray medical scrubs. I watched the white fabric disappear under a pile of coffee grounds. It was the first time I'd breathed in a week. That night, I moved into a tiny shoebox studio in a bad neighborhood. The rent was cheap, and the walls were paper thin. I got a job as a barista. The irony hitting me hard. All those years of brutal academic pressure. All that prestige. And here I was, frothing milk for $8 an hour. This was my cheerleading, my endurance phase. But the nights were mine. I bought an old, refurbished processor with my first paycheck. I didn't sleep. I just worked. I poured all of it, the rage, the grief, the humiliation, the 25 years of being invisible, into my art. I sculpted with light and code, creating massive, impossible structures that defied gravity. Things that were beautiful and broken all at once. I was completely alone, creating in a void, until I posted one of my pieces on a small, obscure online art collective. A message popped up. This isn't just code. This is a soul. His name was Daniel Kim. He was 27. Running the collective from his own tiny apartment in Seoul. He didn't just see garbage. He saw a genius. We talked for hours. Then days. Then weeks. He was like me, an artist, hiding in a world that didn't get him. He was the one who found the grant. A new fund for emerging digital artists. Offering a $750,000 prize. You have to apply. Sarah, he said. This isn't just art. It's the future. I sent in my portfolio, expecting nothing. 6 weeks later, an email arrived that made my hands shake. I'd won $750,000. It was the Kumli Butnga. The sudden justice. We didn't waste a penny. Daniel flew to Chicago. We used that money to build what we'd always dreamed of, a revolutionary platform. A digital gallery where artists could show their work in immersive, interactive spaces. And, more importantly, it get paid for it. We launched it on a Friday. By Monday, our servers had crashed. We'd had over 1 million visitors. The art world, which had ignored digital work for so long, suddenly couldn't look away. And that's when they called a massive, white glove international art fund, based in Zurich. They weren't just interested in the platform. They were interested in me. They wanted to acquire my entire debut collection and the platform's core technology. After 6 months of negotiations, they sent the final offer. $25 million. $25 million. The number just sat there on my screen. It didn't feel real. It was just a string of zeros. I didn't buy champagne. I didn't celebrate. I bought a one-way ticket out of Chicago. I left the cold, gray, clinical city that held all my ghosts. And I flew toward the sun. I flew to Santa Fe. I was drawn by the earth. The warmth, the soulfulness of the high desert. I found a property online. It wasn't a rigid, old money brownstone, like my father's. It was its opposite. It was a sprawling, minimalist adobe estate that seemed to grow organically from the red earth, overlooking a vast, silent canyon. I paid $22 million for it. Cash. The centerpiece wasn't a grand ballroom or a 3-story foyer. It was a studio. A massive, warehouse-sized space with a wall of glass that captured the entire desert panorama. The day the sale closed, I walked into that empty house. The silence was deafening. My footsteps echoed on the stone floors. I stood in my studio, in this $22 million palace of art, and I felt nothing. Just pure, cold fraud. This is the hidden pain of the winner. The moment you get everything you thought you wanted, and you're terrified. You're just a child playing dress-up in a house you didn't deserve. I stood there, looking at the perfect, empty horizon. And all I could think was, my father, Dr. Harrison, holds lives in his hands. He's a surgeon. He saved people. I just make pretty things. The guilt was suffocating. I had run away, played with my digital garbage, and stumbled into a fortune I hadn't earned. I was an imposter in my own life. The imposter syndrome didn't last. The work was too demanding for that. The acquisition was finalized. And I spent the next few months in a blur. I wasn't just an artist. I was the head of a new innovation hub, working with Daniel and the Zurich team to integrate the platform. I was busy. I was focused. And for the first time, I was working on something that felt like me. I was working so hard. In fact, that I almost missed the email. It was from a journalist at Art Forum. It's basically the Bible of the contemporary art world. They wanted to do a feature on me. The article came out 3 weeks later. The cover was a minimalist shot of my studio, the desert glowing in the background. The title was The $25 Million Ghost, How Sarah Harrison, an Unknown, became the new face of digital art. It was a flattering piece. Mostly. It detailed my mysterious exit from the prestigious Harrison medical dynasty, as they called it, and my sudden, explosive arrival in the art world. It was filled with stunning, glossy photos of my Santa Fe estate, the studio, the infinity pool, the vast, open-concept living space. I read it, felt a strange, detached sense of accomplishment, and went back to work. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. An unknown Chicago number. I almost didn't answer. I hadn't spoken to anyone from that city in almost a year. But a cold curiosity made me hit the accept button. Hello. A voice I hadn't heard in 18 months. Hey. Sis. Long time no see. Christopher. His voice was slick. Fake friendly. The one he used on wealthy donors at hospital fundraisers. I could practically hear the manufactured smile. What do you want? Christopher. Whoa. Straight to business. Huh. Just calling to say hi. Saw that article. Art Forum. Very impressive. And... wow. That's a... hell of a house you got out there. My stomach turned to ice. There it was. Mom and Dad saw the article. Too. He continued, his voice dripping with false casualness. And? You know, we were all talking. It's been way too long. We were thinking, we should all come visit. Fly out this weekend. You know, to reconnect. Reconnect. The word hung in the air. A perfect, glitteringly. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was an invasion. They hadn't called when I was disowned. They hadn't called when I was serving coffee and half-starving. They hadn't checked to see if I was alive. But now, the $25 million ghost had a $22 million house. And suddenly, they missed me. They wanted to reconnect. This was the twist Hung Sao, the deep twist. The first twist was the money. This second twist was the revelation of their true, rotten core. Their Tory-ack. Their crime wasn't just cruelty. It was that their love was purely, shamelessly transactional. And the Art Forum article was the first invoice they'd received. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. Fine, I said. My voice was as flat and hard as the desert floor. This weekend? I hung up before he could reply. This wasn't a family reunion. It was an audit. And I was finally ready for it. They arrived on Saturday morning, stepping out of a black rental SUV into the bright, high desert sun. They looked out of place. My father, Michael, in a pressed blazer. My mother, Jennifer, in pearls and a silk shell top. Christopher in loafers. They looked like Chicago, rigid and gray, dropped into the warm, earthy colors of Santa Fe. I met them at the door. My mother tried to hug me. A stiff, awkward gesture. I didn't return. Sarah. You're home, she said, her eyes wide as she stepped into the great room. It's vast. It's different from Lincoln Park, I said. They were visibly stunned. I watched them take it all, in the 20-foot ceilings. The wall of glass looking out over the canyon. The warm light. The personal, human art I'd collected. It was the opposite of our childhood home. Their brownstone was dark, heavy, and cold, filled with furniture that was meant to be looked at, not lived in. My house was light, warm, and personal. I gave them the tour, feeling like a real estate agent in my own home. I was polite, detached. This is the studio, I said, opening the doors. They just stood there, silent. Christopher walked over to one of my unfinished digital sculptures. A massive, swirling form on a bank of monitors. This is What you do? He asked. This is what I do. I said. Impressive. My father said. But his voice was tight. He wasn't looking at the art, he was looking at the size of the studio. He was calculating the square footage. We had lunch on the patio. The food was beautiful. A local chef had prepared a southwestern feast. But the tension was so thick, you could barely breathe. My mother tried to make small talk. This salsa is lovely. Sarah, did you make it? It was catered. Mom. Oh, of course. Christopher stared at his plate. My father swirled his water glass. His jaw set. Finally, after the plates were cleared, he set his napkin down. He cleared his throat. Sarah, he began, looking at the mountains. Not at me. We didn't just come here to see the house. Here it is. I thought. Your brother? He paused, struggling for the words. His private practice is struggling. He took a significant risk. The loans are. They're significant. I looked at Christopher. He was staring intently at his own hands. His face pale. The golden child. The surgical resident who could do no wrong. I wouldn't even meet my eyes. My mother jumped in. Her voice suddenly bright and supportive. We thought. Sarah. Given your success. She gestured around at my home. At the canyon. At the clear blue sky. As if all of it was just a financial statement. We thought you could help. She said. An investment. Really? To help your brother. To keep the Harrison name strong. And there it was. The man Terhui. The public self-destruction. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't an apology. It was a business proposal. They hadn't flown across the country to see their daughter. They had flown across the country to see their ATM. I felt a strange, cold, calm, settle over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hurt. I wasn't angry. I just saw. I saw them for exactly what they were. They didn't come here for me. They came here with a bill. I let the silence sit for a moment. Letting their request hang in the warm desert air, I looked at each of them. My mother, Jennifer, twisting her pearls, desperate for a return to the comfortable lie. My brother, Christopher, the golden child, now just a weak man staring at his lap. And my father, Dr. Michael Harrison, the head of surgery, a man who could hold a human heart in his hands, but had no idea what to do with one. I felt nothing. No rage. No old, familiar pain. Just clarity. You didn't come here to reconnect, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence. You came here with a bill. My mother started to protest. Sarah, that's not fair. We're your family. No, I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement. A fact. My father's head snapped up. He wasn't used to that word. No, he repeated. As if he'd misheard. No, I said again. I won't be investing in Christopher's practice. I won't be keeping the Harrison name strong. I'm done with that name. I stood up. They looked so small from where I was standing. I used to be so desperate for your approval. I told them. I spent 25 years tying myself in knots. Trying to be the second best, Harrison. But when you threw me out, you set me free. And I met people who actually see the world for what it is. I thought of my mentor, Mary Thompson, the 60-year-old gallery owner, who'd taken me under her wing when I first got to Santa Fe. Mary taught me the difference between your world and mine. I said. She said you. Dad. You live an extractive life. Everything is a transaction. You use medicine. Not to heal. But for status. For money. For control. You don't see Christopher as your son. You see him as a legacy asset that's underperforming. My father's face went white. Christopher flinched. You came here today to extract from me. I continued. But I'm building a generative life. My work. This digital garbage. It builds community. It inspires. It creates new value in the world. I walked to the edge of the patio, looking out at the canyon. I am making an investment. Actually, I just finalized the papers. I'm funding a community art studio in Santa Fe, a place for underserved youth. Kids who are like I was. Kids who are told their passion is a waste of good metal. I'm giving them the tools and the space to build. That is my legacy. Dad, not yours. I turned back to them. They were silent. Defeated. Finally seeing me, clearly. Not as a daughter, but as a power they had lost. The guest rooms are ready, I said. My voice flat. But I think you should leave. My father stood. For a second, I thought he would yell. That I'd see the old rage. But there was nothing. Just a cold. Empty void. He nodded. Once. Jennifer. Christopher. They left. I didn't watch them drive away. It's been 6 months since that day. My studio is no longer empty. It's filled with laughter and chaos. Daniel moved his life here. He runs the platform from the guest house. Mary comes by for wine on Fridays. And on weekends, the kids from the art studio come over. We work on a massive, collaborative sculpture. We make a mess. We create. I look at them. At Daniel. At Mary, the family I chose. The family I built, and I feel a sense of peace that no amount of money could ever buy. My name is Sarah Harrison. I was disowned by my family. But I found my legacy. Not in the prestige they demanded, but in the blueprint I drew for myself. So what's your blueprint? What are you building? Let me know in the comments.